This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
International leaders gather in Berlin seeking to hammer a peace deal for Libya amid a halt in the country's oil exports. Why there is mounting criticism against the UN on how it responds to issues affecting the African continent. And we sample artistic artworks from Africa being showcased in a unique traveling exhibition. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Senior economists, officials, and experts in Tunisia examined the successes of the Belt and Road Initiative and the outcomes from a forum in Togo on stopping the distribution and use of counterfeit medicine. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. We begin in Germany, where a summit is bringing together foreign powers backing rival camps in the Libya conflict. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is attending the summit and has already met with his Turkish foreign minister. Germany and the United States hope to persuade Russia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates and Egypt to push for a lasting suspension of hostilities. On Monday, Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar walked out on a Russia-Turkish summit without signing a ceasefire proposal put forward to him and his rival Fayez al-Sarraj, who leads the internationally recognized government of national accord. Libya has been at war since 2011. Thousands of its people have been displaced and killed as the rival leaders tussle for power, each backed by foreign countries. All right, let's now go to Berlin, where Ira Spritzer joins us now with an update. Ira, thanks for joining us here on Africa Live. It's yet another attempt to find lasting peace in Libya. What's the significance of this summit in Berlin, and who will be represented there, Ira?
Well, when you look at the list of attendees at today's summit in Berlin, it really does show you how critical countries around the world are feeling and are taking the steps in the Libyan peace process here. Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected, as well as Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as you mentioned, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, as well as the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, French President Emmanuel Macron, and others. And what I think this all speaks to is, of course, that this sense that this conflict is perhaps coming to a tipping point where there are fears that it could become worse and descend into the type of situation where, which we've seen in Syria, for example. So this could be regarded as a chance to change that course, to perhaps come up with some sort of roadmap towards peace in Libya. Now, of course, that is an incredibly difficult prospect given the acrimony between those two sides. General Khalifa Haftar's forces currently control most of the country and have been laying siege to the capital Tripoli for the past 9 months. They do have the backing of foreign powers such as the United Arab Emirates and Egypt. And then recently we've seen Turkey really intervene on the side of the UN-backed Libyan government. They've sent some troops in recently to join that effort. We're not sure in exactly what capacity those troops will be involved there. So extremely complicated, but the hope here in Berlin is to try and sign a ceasefire agreement, that agreement that was not successful in Moscow, and to try and reinforce the United Nations weapons embargo against Libya, which has, of course, been much violated in recent years.
Well, Ira, a proxy war, no doubt. So many countries involved. Talk to us about the challenge of enforcing the resolutions of the summit likely to be addressed if there is a signed deal on the table.
Right. Well, that certainly would be quite a victory for all sides concerned here if there was a real enforceable agreement to come out of this Berlin conference. Now, we don't know exactly how enforcement would work. That would be one of the things they're discussing today and would really be the next challenge. Interestingly, Germany's defense minister recently said that Germany would be open to sending in peacekeepers, if you will, were such an agreement to come into force. So I think we would then, of course, see these world powers try and work together to lessen those tensions in Libya, but certainly appears very difficult. There is recently this blockade of Libyan oil ports, which has that's undertaken by Khalifa Haftar's rebels in the east of the country. So they've really slowed down Libya's very valuable oil production at the moment. So that is another issue which is going to be discussed here today. But they said they did that in response to Turkey's involvement in the crisis. But again, all the key players are in Berlin today, so maybe we will see some sort of movement on these issues.
All right, Iris Spritzer, thank you for that update and report, and thank you so much for your perspective. Moving on, meanwhile, Libya's oil exports have been blocked. As mentioned, the country's national oil corporation says forces loyal to General Khalifa Haftar shut down major ports where crude is sent to the global market. It came as Haftar, the head of the eastern-based Libyan National Army, arrived in Berlin for the Libya summit. Rebel forces say the profits from oil sales are funding the rival GNA's fight against Haftar. Well, the head of the UN Libya mission, Ghassan Salami, shared his hopes ahead of the Berlin summit.
Now, I can't compel any head of state to raise this rather than that issue, but I won't be surprised that a few participants raised the necessity of keeping the neutrality of the national oil company in place. You certainly have people who are there for ideological reasons. You have also experts helping with drones and things like that. They have different legal status, but the number of non-Libyans participating in the war has been on the increase, and this is certainly not a good sign.
The Security Council's permanent 5 states and 7 other countries are about to pursue a new deal in Libya. The UN, EU, AU and the Arab League are joining the talks, which will discuss the possibility of sending peacekeepers, hoping to reach a lasting ceasefire and possibly a new agreed-upon government. Influential players like Qatar, Tunisia, Greece and Morocco are not participating.
There is no doubt that the absence of 4 great influential actors in terms of the Libyan crisis is a great issue. It's a headline, in fact. But the thing is, most likely that the outcome that would come out of this deal would be backed by by a long list of international actors who are also influential on Libya. And that would make the case of persuading them with the final outcome much easier.
Berlin aims to reach similar outcomes to the 4 previous agreements reached. A joint agreed-upon military, economic and executive committees which should lead political transition. The main difference is the call for sanctions from the UN Security Council against countries which help in breaching the ceasefire.
It's step number 1 if we are speaking about peace in Libya. This war has been in place for almost a decade by now. And just to make sure that there is a smooth transition from war into peace, you have to get the approval of all parties to this conflict that they will not be supporting weapons or arms to those fighting on the ground.
It's not clear if both rival leaders, Faiz al-Sarraj and Khalifa Haftar, will hold direct talks, but as their allies try to reach an agreement, their approval will be crucial.
The conflict in Libya has appeared to be growing beyond control, fueling tension between Egypt and Turkey, which declared sending troops to its allies in Tripoli. Standing at equal distances between the rival parties in Libya, Germany hopes it could diffuse the tension before Libya turns into another Syria. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And displaced Libyans in Tripoli are also hoping for fruitful talks leading to a truce between the warring parties at the Berlin conference.
Regarding the ceasefire and the clashes in Tripoli, our hope is very, very big that all firing stops and that the initiatives from sister states and foreign countries will definitely have tangible and concrete results.
We hope, and God willing, at the conference on Sunday, that God will unite their word and they will reach an agreement so that I can return to my home.
Our demands are legitimate. We do not want any of Islamic State or criminals in our country, and this is our right. Therefore, if they follow this logic, then I believe it will be successful and fair.
The United Nations has been coming under close scrutiny over the years regarding its response to African issues. CGTN's Ulisa and Jamila followed this up with two experts to examine the global body's relationship with Africa.
Through its unique capabilities as the world's vehicle for international cooperation, the United Nations system plays a significant role in coordinating assistance of all kinds to help Africa help itself, from promoting the development of democratic institutions to establishing peace between warring nations. The UN is present on the ground supporting economic and social development and the promotion and protection of human rights on the continent. At least that's according to the organization itself. The United Nations works closely with Africa's cooperation mechanism. The organization also has a number of active peacekeeping missions on the continent. But the international body has often come under criticism for a lack of full commitment to issues on the African continent.
It seems as if there is no interest when it comes to attending to African issues from the United Nations. If we go back to review a few crises that has taken place in Africa, we have a genocide that took place in Rwanda, which left a huge lasting scar on the face of Africa. If you scrutinize the details of the war event, it will show you that there was less interest shown by the United Nations, in particular, United States of America.
Muchero says when the continent experienced more crisis, the international body was nowhere to be found.
We had a crisis in Sudan. We had a crisis in Somalia. Actually, the crisis in Somalia was sorted out by African nations, Rwanda, Kenya, Burundi. The East African states are the ones who handled the situation, but the United Nations failed to address the situation.
The political analyst says the fact that the continent has no permanent seat on the UN Security Council is also quite telling. South Africa recently officially assumed its seat as the non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the period of 2019 to 2020.
Africa is actually the second largest bloc of membership in the United Nations. This is a continent of about 1.2 billion people, and it has not even a single representative in such a vital organ. And at the end of the day, more crises, more security crises happen in Africa. But yet Africa has no representative in the United Nations Security Council.
At least one political analyst believes that it's about time that Africa gathers its resources and speak with one voice.
African countries, individually and collectively, have not been able to commit technical and material resources to drive their role within the United Nations. And that is a problem because you can't be a permanent member of the Security Council and still want to depend on donor aid to drive your agenda. Having said that, I think that in doing so, there is need for the UN to be more flexible and adjust to emerging reconfiguration of politics and socio-economic power so that African countries can prominently play their roles in its structures.
The two main centers of UN activity in Africa are Nairobi, Kenya, and Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Ulisa and Jamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And this is Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more news coming your way after the break, including the outcomes from a forum in Togo on stopping the distribution and use of counterfeit medicine. And the failure to write a will by the late Zimbabwean President Mugabe puts the spotlight on estate planning.
How will your world change today? What happens here What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. A forum looking to combat counterfeit medicine has just wrapped up in Togo. A number of current and former African presidents attended the conference. Discussions were also held with experts such as the Director General of the World Health Organization.
The global market for counterfeit drugs is worth billions of dollars. Between 2013 and 2017, 42% of reported fake medicines came from Africa.
In my opinion, in order to get rid of them, you have to start where they are made. You have to get rid of the companies that make them, and if it's on the market stall, the good lady is going to buy because she can't afford to go to the pharmacy.
Here in Togo, leaders and experts are looking to tackle these issues head-on. This includes stopping the trafficking and use of counterfeit medicine.
We will engage our respective countries in an unprecedented initiative, launching a resolute and effective fight against the trafficking of counterfeit medicine. We have decided to put in place the necessary structures and legislation to curb this traffic and criminalize its various forms.
According to the World Health Organization, fake drugs were implicated in 9% of malaria fatalities. Astatal, CGTN.
Now let's take a look at the scourge of sea piracy. Despite a decline in global piracy incidents in 2019, a maritime watchdog says attacks are still rampant across the Gulf of Guinea, with several kidnappings reported last year. The assessment was made in the International Maritime Bureau's annual piracy report. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more.
With frequent naval exercises like this, it's something of a paradox that the Gulf of Guinea is still the most active piracy sport in the world. Last year alone, the navies of the Gulf of Guinea and their international partners held at least 2 major naval drills throughout the Gulf. In one case, over 30 national navies took part in the drill on the waters of the Gulf. The drills were also a show of force to deter sea pirates.
Nigerians out there, we want them to know that Navy is working. And to those criminals at sea, I think this is the time they should realize that the time is over for them to operate.
Despite those assurances by the Nigerian Navy last year, the pirates have dug in and continue to devise new means of beating security at sea.
Making our water safe is a situation where they empower Navy. All over the world, if you see some of the consignments that are coming through American vessels are being accompanied by their naval merchant vessels, war vessels that are coming behind them and taking protection of all the piracies. Even on the Gulf of Guinea, even beyond Gulf of Guinea, they help them to come. Most central world, like Asians, they have their own vessels being manned by their naval combatant vessels. So I think Nigeria will empower Nigerian Navy very enormously, give them boats, speedboats, warfare boats, and giving them a total security apparatus to cobweb all the problems they're having at the Gulf of Guinea and beyond.
Maritime watchdog, the International Maritime Bureau, says the number of sailors kidnapped in the Gulf of Guinea last year shot up by 50%, with 121 crew abducted at sea, mainly for ransom. This accounts for over 90% of global kidnappings reported at sea. Most of the incidents in the Gulf occur in Nigeria's oil-rich Niger Delta region, considered a bastion for sophisticated pirates. And this is despite the heavy presence of the Nigerian Navy in the waters of the region. The situation has forced shippers in the country to devise their own initiative of protecting themselves from attacks.
These days, there's this we call secure anchorage area. Secure anchorage area is where some group of individuals have taken a decision to man all the Nigerian import vessels. And those secure anchorage areas is being organized with them and Nigerian Navy. But you know, it's very controversial now because too many charges are being leveled to all the vessels that are coming. And those vessels are saying that they are putting those charges back to the final consumers of the goods. So it becomes a very controversial issue now.
Sea pirates in Nigeria's Delta region are often well armed. Aided by fast boats and a maze of creeks perfect for hiding, they often attack passing vessels, taking sailors hostage for ransom payments. The Nigerian Navy actually stopped some of the attacks, but obviously, sometimes the pirates are just one step ahead of the security agency. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Zimbabwe's former president, Robert Mugabe, died with $10 million cash in the bank, and that's according to a legal letter from his daughter, quoted by state media. But it appears that Mugabe did not have a last will and testament, a revelation that left many surprised. This puts a spotlight on estate planning in Africa. CGTN's Farai Wakatiya is in Harare and filed this report.
For a man who wanted things done his way, right up to where he got buried, Robert Mugabe left many stunned when it emerged he hadn't left a will.
I'm surprised, I'm shocked also up to now that you would think that a person of that stature and who was also of a particular kind of person, was clearly very particular and very methodical and very pedantic about the things that he did. He was a person of procedure and form. But he left his estate, without a will. I mean, he didn't provide for that. It's rather odd. It's disappointing. I mean, I think we must start our good governance at the personal level and show an example.
The former member of parliament, who's been trying to push for more people, including women, to write wills, says Mugabe's failure to put his wishes down in writing could frustrate the little headway her campaign has made. Mugabe's lawyer told me in December that he believes the former leader had faith in the existing legislation. However, details that emerged after his death vindicate proponents of estate planning.
In his estate, apparently, there was an expectation around certain properties that were presumed to be his, but then they are said to belong to his political party. So, you see, writing a will makes a person tidy up and tie up all those ends. Because as part of writing a will, I'm sure what he should have done was to also, while he was alive, to also process and do the paperwork that it takes for him, because it looks like it might have been his benefit to tie.
While the laws are in place, they may not be adequate.
The law is not enough. The law is not enough for two reasons. One, the writing of a will makes it, more likely that the law will be implemented, that there will be a distribution. Usually when we don't do that at all, matters just stay like that. Like I said to you, you have share certificates that just stay like that. Title deeds in the same house, car registration. Cars will have names of dead people. It will just float along, and people won't have the incentive to actually move it and get it registered.
Mugabe's daughter Bona was appointed executor of his estate and is currently in the process of enumerating his assets, which are believed to include $10 million held in a local bank account and several residential properties. Farai Wakatiya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, can Made in Africa cigars compete with Cuba? Well, one man is venturing where none has gone before, making Africa's first and only premium cigar. CGTN's Daniela Pearson reports.
In smoking lounges across the world, a Cuban cigar is the ultimate status symbol. But Bongani Cigar, an upstart brand, wants to muscle its way into the luxury market and put a new place on the map.
I started smoking cigars 10 to 12 years ago.
I recently started smoking the Bongani cigars, and I can see the difference that Bongani is doing. I can see that it's becoming better, and it's very nice to have a cigar that is rolled in Mozambique, made in Africa. Even clients come here looking for Bongani cigars.
Com clientes que cada vez mais vêm para aqui e vêm à procura do Bongani.
Anthony Padilla Perez is from the Dominican Republic, an island in the Caribbean. He was recruited as head of production at Bongani to train a workforce in the precise art of rolling by hand. He explains that while the tobacco is grown in Mozambique, the leaves that cover each cigar come from another African nation.
What we have here is a cigar cover that comes from Cameroon, and it's called the Cameroon cover. It is used all over the world on most of the famous cigars in the world, and we are talking about Gran Reserva Arturo Fuente.
As a newcomer that sold its first cigar in 2016, Bongani can't boast of 30-year aged tobacco like some of its well-established rivals. Bongani cigars are priced around 10% less than the equivalent Cuban. Standard smoke sells for around $13. This makes it easy for the brand to appeal to those looking for an African terroir. This French term means the taste imparted to wine by the environment in which it is produced.
Setup costs are not that big. What is harder is putting everything together, is training the people, keeping them focused, bringing your raw material, making sure it arrives on time, shipping your products. This is the hard bit.
CEO Kamal Mukeba says his cigars appeal to a growing, aspirational African middle class keen to show off. Bongani sells in South Africa, Kenya, and of course, Mozambique.
I would say Bongani cigars will be great on the African continent, being homegrown and a home cigar, if you want to call it that, made in Africa for Africans. Yeah, it'll certainly appeal. I don't think it'll take off elsewhere. For the simple reason, it's not really up to the Cuban cigar standard, and also the Nicaraguan, Dominican, as well as Honduran cigars. But yes, it's not a bad cigar nonetheless.
The cigar maker is currently focused on the African market. Bongani, which means be grateful in Zulu, produces nearly 10,000 cigars a month. It's a small number compared to the big producers, but the company is hoping to launch in Nigeria and eventually in the UK, targeting African professionals working abroad. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
An engineer in Nigeria's southeastern state of Anambra is now the talk of the town. He has developed a hydroelectric generator which turns waste into petroleum products. He is hoping he could commercialize his innovation and create employment opportunities for young Nigerians. CGTN's Brian Toussaint has that story.
An engineer by profession, Emeka Ugwuezi set up his mini technology lab in Alka. His latest invention, a water-powered generator prototype, has been the talk of the town in recent months. Powered by high-voltage motorcycle batteries with no carbon emissions, it can last over 6 hours depending on the energy consumption rates.
I actually lost a friend to a generator which actually brought about this, because I wanted to do something that kind of eliminate the use of gasoline generators in the society. So I'm actually an advocate of clean energy and waste management.
Trained in metallurgy at a technical college, he has set out to solve problems across the environmental, health, and industrial sectors. However, Emeka has to rely on donations to purchase the required components for his inventions.
I usually source my raw materials from waste bins. In fact, I go and get discarded electronic components. At some point, friends do a lot of donation. Like people, you see what I do, just love what I create. They just, okay, take this, use it to get this at the end of the day. So as things grows on, they keep on happening that way, even from social media. People have not even known me tend to donate some money just to make sure that the dream doesn't die off.
Emeka has 12 innovations so far. He created this generator in 2001, and he has been progressively improving it. This particular invention has generated interest from across town due to the benefits that come with it.
People think that, even some actually tend to dispute that what I'm actually doing is not sustainable, or it doesn't work, or it's a lie, I'm trying to connote something. But at the end of the day, you end up seeing that it's actually real. I'm not saying that we arrived there yet. It still has its own flaws.
It is very, very excellent. I'm even begging him to, sell for me, but he said that it's not possible now. I'm even waiting for any time that he has produced it on going to the market. That is must. I must even purchase like 5 for myself and my family.
Most businesses and homes in Nigeria are forced to run on diesel or petrol-powered generators. It is estimated that around 80 million people do not have access to grid power supplies. Emeka hopes his invention could play a role in expunging the difficulties faced in Africa's most populated country. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
France and nations from Africa's Sahel region recently agreed to step up military cooperation to fight the jihadist insurgencies in Western Africa. Security forces will now be placed under one umbrella, and efforts focus on tackling the Islamic State group. This was agreed upon at the summit held earlier this week, and citizens from West Africa expressed mixed reactions following that gathering in Pau, France. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
Jihadist attacks have been on the increase in the Sahel region. Troops and citizens from Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania and Niger have borne the heaviest brunt of the violence. This is despite the presence of 4,500 troops from France stationed in the region to support the poorly equipped local armies. Leaders of the G5 Sahel, along with their French counterpart, met last week to discuss the deteriorating security situation in the Sahel region. The nations agreed to a joint command structure coalition for the Sahel to tackle the insurgency. Citizens in the G5 and West Africa have been reacting to the agreements reached in that summit.
I think we need to look at other approaches to deal with this problem. To do this, we must first recognize that this conflict is the result of injustices and daily misery, and to act to find concrete solutions to these problems.
France says it will send an additional 220 troops to supplement the thousands already in the region. But there has been tensions, mainly in Mali, regarding the presence of the French troops.
I was saddened by this meeting because we think that the problem of Africans must be solved in Africa by Africans themselves. Normally, the French army should no longer exist in Africa because we have enough African soldiers who have a good command of the borders of the continent and who can also defend themselves against the enemy. This is why I maintain that the French army should withdraw on the ground. If, for example, the Malian people believe the presence of the French forces is no longer relevant, it's wise for the force to leave the Sahel and let Africa manage this crisis itself.
I believe that we must seek to know the real cause of this ineffectiveness by asking ourselves questions. To know, does the French army collaborate frankly with the armies of the Sahelian countries? If yes, is the collaboration sincere? Is the public involved in terms of information? These are the questions to which we must find answers. But from my point of view, the meeting of PAU in France is beneficial, but we should have taken into account the opinions of the populations before taking the decisions.
The security crisis in the region started in 2012 when an alliance of separatists and Islamist militants took over northern Mali. That triggered a French military intervention to oust them. A peace deal was signed in 2015 but was never completely implemented, and new armed groups emerged and extended to central Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And we'll see you on the other side of the break with your business news. Here's a look at the headline. Senior economists, officials, and experts in Tunisia examine the successes of the Belt and Road Initiative.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Tunisia has been hosting an international conference on the Belt and Road Initiative. Senior economists, officials, and experts shed light on the successes of what some analysts say is the most ambitious economic infrastructure and cultural project of the 21st century.
The event is organized by the International Center for Strategic Security and Military Studies, CSM. Experts noted that making the world a better place is the ultimate goal of the Belt and Road Initiative.
Tunisia's traditional partner, Europe, is facing enormous difficulties, while developments in China is spectacular. The Belt and Road Initiative is changing Africa and the world for the better. It's not just a project for China's welfare, it's a universal project for humanity.
The ambassador of China in Tunisia emphasized that his country's economic vision aims to boost industries in Africa, as well as the volume and quality of exported goods.
China's investments in Africa have exceeded $46 billion. China also created over 3,700 enterprises of all types. The cooperation dynamic, African countries can improve their industrial capacities and increase exports.
Economists believe that China could become one of the favorite trade partners for Tunisian companies and expanding to international markets.
Tunisian companies can export more products to China. It's a huge market with increasing demands in many sectors. The Belt and Road project highlights the win-win partnership. Therefore, together we can explore cooperation potential and expand mutual investments.
Tunisian strategists assert that the Belt and Road Initiative did not only connect Asia with the Middle East, Africa and Europe through building a trade and infrastructure network along the ancient trade routes. It has also created new markets for China and its partner countries while improving the quality of life for millions of people in the world. According to the National Institute of Statistics, Tunisia's trade deficit hit a record level of $6.9 billion throughout 2019. Economists believe that the North African state could become one of the main platforms for the manufacture and export of Chinese goods to Africa and Europe. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The recent signing of the first phase of a trade agreement between China and the U.S. has garnered global attention. The Deputy Speaker of South Africa's National Assembly has this to say about the agreement.
Multilateralism is critical to the conduct of politics in the world. If we don't do that, then we run the risk of delaying progress that can be made by collaboration and cooperation. So we are glad that this step has been taken recently, and it's a platform for advancing a global appropriate economic setup.
And to South Africa, where some of the continent's finest horses went under the hammer at the annual Premier Yearling Sale in Cape Town. South Africa's yearlings are noted for their race pedigree and often attract a host of international buyers. This year's horse auction proved no different. CGTN's Travers Andrews has more.
For the last 10 years, the Premier Yearling Sale has been the horse race industry's curtain raiser, unveiling what could be race-winning champions. This year's auction saw 232 horses in total go under the hammer, and most for a snap. But it takes a good eye to see true quality and potential, even amongst bloodstock with championship lineage. The sheer variety, though, makes this an event like no other on the continent.
By all accounts, it feels like we've got a really strong catalogue this year. Last year, I think it would be fair to say that we were a little stronger on the fillies and the colts, whereas this year there's a much better spread of quality between the fillies and the colts. A good couple of new first season sires represented at the sale.
which is made for a strong catalogue, which includes horses that are set to be purchased for the export market. South African prices remain a fraction of what they are in other race capitals of the world.
Numbers have shown that over the last number of years, it's the amount of horses and value of horses bought by overseas buyers have increased every year. And this year, I don't think will be an exception. There's a good few new international buyers.
The stud industry is also an important job creator in the Western Cape, employing hundreds of groomsmen to tend to the animals. Each horse is seen as an important investment throughout the value chain. Now, the Cloverface Stud Farm is one of the most impressive outfits in South Africa, and they're sitting with an ace up their sleeve. In the form of this yearling by Give Me the Green Light, whose championship pedigree tips it to be a future star that could compete in some of the most prestigious events around the world.
We just happen to have his half-brother by Give Me the Green Light on sale, and possibly he could be the biggest horse on the sale. I would envisage he'd probably be around 2 million to 3 million rand, maybe in Hong Kong dollars. It's probably about $1.5 million, maybe $2 million.
It was the yearlings, though, with proven bloodlines that fetched the highest prices and will likely go on to become successful race competitors both locally and abroad. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And we're not done just yet. We've got more news coming your way after the break. Let's take a look at that headline. We sample artistic artworks from Africa being showcased in a unique traveling exhibition.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A Pan-African art exhibition has been showcasing the work of contemporary artists. Visitors at Senegal's Museum of Black Civilization got to see over 100 artworks. CGTN's Asta Tal has more.
The organizers of Lend Me Your Dream exhibition had a mission to showcase the continent's artists to an African audience. London, Paris, and Berlin are well known on the art circuit. But this exhibition is traveling to major African cities in the hopes of highlighting the continent's market.
Lend Me Your Dream is a traveling Pan-Africanist exhibition. It brought together some 30 major artists from the African continent. The exhibitors were composed of contemporary artists who met in Casablanca to create the works of this exhibition, which was inaugurated on June 18, 2019 in Casablanca with great success. This exhibition now presents its first touring stage, and it is Dakar which hosted the exhibition in this wonderful Museum of Black Civilizations, which is for us an exceptional cultural infrastructure.
After Dakar, the exhibition will travel to Abidjan, Lagos, Addis Ababa, and Cape Town. For attendees, the exhibition also gave them a chance to celebrate Senegal's old art culture.
We can be pleased that Dakar and Senegal are becoming this place where art has its full place and where such important cultural events are organized. This exhibition represents the diversity, quality, and potential of African artists. It participates in building a bridge between civilizations, and that is the role of culture and art.
Lend Me Your Dreams will remain at the Museum of Black Civilizations until January 28th. Asta Tal, CGTN.
South Africa has produced many acclaimed opera singers over the past few decades. Now, there's a young girl in Cape Town who is passionate about singing and dreams of becoming a success in the opera world against all odds that life has dealt her. Nta has this story.
16-year-old Bianca Solomons and her adopted mom, Ellen Fouchier, have always had an extra special bond. Bianca was just a few hours old when her biological mother abandoned her and left her in Ellen's care. The teenager says she's battled depression for the past few years as a result of being bullied at school and financial and other challenges at home. But she's convinced that music and a love of singing opera helped save her life.
This passion of music came since I was the age of 5, and I always liked to sing with the people that I saw on TV a lot. So that's where my hobby came from, and that's why I love opera so much.
Bianca has won numerous awards in the past few years and knows that there's much hard work to be done to achieve her goals.
I'm very proud of her. So I just want her to go up and up and up. Go do everything the right way. And come up, she must be at the top. I want to see her at the top. And she can do it.
Bianca Solomons has always dreamt of going overseas and is set to travel later this year to perform abroad for the very first time. But right now, she's keen to finish high school online so she can go on to study music at university and eventually pursue a full-time career as an opera singer.
Opera means a lot to me because it inspires me a lot. It makes me who I want to be and not who others want me to be for them. My music kind of inspires me a lot to think not negatively but positive.
Nta, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Inspiring story there, but guess what? We've got your sports news also coming up next after the break. Don't go away. Here's a look at the headline. Nigeria's